Why did they laugh when she opened the case? Maybe it was the color. Maybe it was the silence she carried with her. Or maybe it was because none of them could imagine that a weapon painted bright red could ever belong in a place like this. Rachel didn't flinch. The crowd's laughter rolled across the Nevada desert like a cheap echo, bouncing off tents and gravel, filling the hot morning air. Competitors slapped each other on the shoulder, jokes spilling freely, as though mocking her was a sport in itself. They saw a novelty, a young woman walking onto the line with no sponsors, no visible record, and no name they recognized. She looked out of place in a field where scars spoke louder than medals and reputations had already been carved in steel. But there was something they didn't know, something she hadn't told them. Rachel moved like someone who had rehearsed every step. The door of her faded sedan clicked shut behind her and she lifted a long, black case from the trunk. Her boots struck the gravel without hurry. She wasn't here to prove anything. She wasn't here to entertain them. She was here because of a promise. At 27, she carried herself with the kind of restraint that comes from years of discipline. Her hair was tied back, not immaculate but precise, her eyes shielded by nothing but calm calculation. She walked toward the registration tent as though the crowd's noise didn't exist. Inside, the air smelled of canvas, paper, and gun oil. Clipboards moved from hand to hand. ID checks, signatures, quick remarks, a machine of procedure. She said, voice level, pen scratching her name across the line. The officer at the table barely looked up. His eyes slid past her toward the bigger men with the bigger rifles. "Never heard of you," he muttered. "Which unit?" "Air Force," she replied. A smirk tugged at his mouth. "Well, good luck. These guys eat ranges like this for breakfast." He handed her a slip. "Number 49, last in the firing order, last to matter." Rachel only nodded and stepped back into the sunlight. Out on the range, the world was already alive. Competitors were busy unpacking tripods, polishing barrels, attaching scopes that gleamed like jewelry. They laughed, compared notes, bragged about past wins, and filled the desert with sound. When Rachel knelt by her canopy and opened her case, silence followed. The rifle inside blazed crimson red, as though dipped in fire and polished to shine. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jokes came quickly. "What is that, a parade piece?" someone muttered. "Guess we're running a fashion show now," another laughed. But she didn't react. She slid the bolt into place with practiced ease, locked the bipod, checked the scope, chambered a test round. Each movement smooth, efficient, unhurried. Sergeant Garrison, a man built on 3 tours overseas and an ego to match, pushed forward through the crowd. "This ain't a car show, Lieutenant," he barked. "War doesn't come in bright colors." The laughter roared. Rachel didn't look at him. Her hand brushed briefly against the small red pendant around her neck, a chip of glass that caught the morning sun. She held it once firmly, then let it fall back against her chest. The range officer arrived, clipboard in hand. Major Brooks. At 40, he carried the kind of presence that silenced even the loudest. He unrolled a chart. "Ladies and welcome to the Long Range Precision Championship." His voice cut through the air, commanding attention. "Your targets are staged at 700, 1,000, 1,800, 2,700, 3,800, and 4,900 meters. The final round will be set at 5,900. That's nearly 4 miles. No official competitor has ever struck at that distance." The murmurs that followed were heavy. 4 miles, impossible. Competitors will fire in reverse order of registration. That means Lieutenant Brooks' eyes flicked toward her, will open each round. All heads turned to the red rifle. Rachel adjusted her sling. No words, no smile, just preparation. The first stage, 700 meters. Routine for most, but for her, the pressure doubled. Not only was she first, she was the outsider, the punchline. Spotters lifted scopes. Wind tugged at flags. The air went still with anticipation. "Shooter ready," Brooks called. Rachel dropped prone. Her cheek pressed against the stock, her body aligned with a precision that could have been drawn from a manual. 3 breaths, a half exhale, trigger squeeze. The crack echoed, a heartbeat later metallic ping, dead center. The spotter blinked, hesitated, then raised his voice. "Hit, dead center." Silence followed, silence so sharp it cut through the crowd's disbelief. Rachel rechambered. No celebration, no smile, just inevitability. Someone muttered, "Beginner's luck." Garrison folded his arms, watching closely. He didn't laugh now. Her form was flawless. Breathing, grip, recoil control, not the work of a rookie, something else, something he couldn't place. Competitors cycled through the line. Some hit, some missed, some clipped the steel. When's turn came, his round smacked the plate with certainty. He straightened, declaring, "That's how you do it in real combat." The younger shooters nodded. Rachel said nothing. She packed quietly, waiting for the next distance. At 1,000 meters, the wind picked up. Dust rose, flags twitched. The desert was alive and restless. Rachel lay prone again, repeating the ritual. 3 breaths, half exhale, crack, metallic ping, center strike. The spotter's voice carried hesitation, disbelief. 2 in a row. Now the murmurs grew heavier. This wasn't luck. This was something else. Narrowed his eyes. No rookie pulled that twice. Not at that distance. His pride shifted uneasily as respect began to leak from his grip. Rachel returned to her bench, flipped open a waterproof notebook. The pages weren't filled with simple range charts. They were covered in lines of complex formulas, spin drift, barometric pressure, effect, calculations no one else in sight seemed to understand. She murmured to herself as she wrote, adjustments precise, her expression unchanged. The rifle gleamed under the sun. For a moment, a memory slipped through her mind, 17 years old, lying on a wooden bench beside her twin sister. Both of them hitting targets with uncanny accuracy, their father watching from behind with quiet pride. Her sister's grin vivid, sharp in memory. "Don't miss, Ra." The promise had never left her. Blink, the memory was gone. The desert returned. At 1,800 meters, most competitors struggled. Mirage blurred the air. Wind twisted unpredictably. Shots went wide, clipped frames, kicked up dust. Confidence faltered. Rachel dropped prone, but this time her breathing pattern changed. 5 shallow inhales, 1 deep, then the pause, a rhythm unfamiliar to everyone watching. The rifle cracked, the plate rang center. Gasps spread across the line. His jaw tightened. That wasn't textbook breathing. That wasn't anything he'd ever seen. He leaned toward another veteran. "You ever seen that technique?" The man shook his head. "Not in any school I know." Folded his arms, unsettled. When his turn came, he landed close to the bull. Respectable, but not unforgettable, not like her. And as Rachel walked past him, he called out, "Where'd you learn to shoot, Lieutenant?" She glanced briefly, calm, here and there, then kept walking. His jaw clenched, he'd find out. The desert pressed on. The competition rolled toward impossible distances, but the truth was already shifting. The rookie, the red rifle, the woman they laughed at. She had just changed the game. What secret was hidden in the way she breathed? The others didn't know. Garrison didn't know. Even the veterans who had spent decades behind scopes couldn't name it. But one man watching from the bleachers recognized it instantly. Colonel Walter Briggs. His wheelchair creaked as he leaned forward, whispering words no one else around him understood. "That's Helios breathing." The man beside him frowned. "Helios, what's that?" Briggs shook his head. "Shouldn't even be public." His voice was low, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that came from experience. His ears caught it, Helios. He rolled the word around in his head, unfamiliar, unsettling. It wasn't in any manual, not in any training he'd studied. And when he searched his memory, nothing came close. The shots kept coming. At 2,700 meters, the desert began to shift against the shooters. Heat shimmered in the air. Wind sheared unpredictably. Every bullet fought against the atmosphere, the invisible battlefield of physics and patience. Competitors muttered, missed, swore. A few clipped steel but not center. Rachel opened her waterproof notebook again. The pages were filled with more than numbers. They looked like another language entirely, lines of calculations strung together in patterns no one else could follow. She scribbled notes, adjusted her scope, and set down a small digital device. Numbers flashed across its screen: density, altitude, barometric pressure, temperature shifts. One man scoffed, overcomplicated, but just watched. He wasn't laughing anymore. Rachel lay prone. The rifle glowed crimson under the high desert sun, almost alive in her hands. Her body stilled, finger curled. The rifle cracked, the plate rang, dead center. The spotter's voice carried on now. And in the bleachers, Colonel Briggs whispered again. Impossible unless. His voice trailed off, as if the memory of something classified weighed too heavily to share. Felt unease creep deeper into his chest. He pulled out his phone, fingers tapping quickly. Rachel, Air Force. He searched every record he could reach. Nothing. No competition results. No deployment logs. No service awards. Nothing at all. She was a ghost. The desert carried on, wind twisting harder, clouds building at the ridge. At 3,800 meters, the air grew cooler, heavier. Gusts snapped canvas overhead. Targets shimmered in the haze. Even the most experienced shooters hesitated, calculating, doubting. Rachel moved as though hesitation didn't exist. She shifted her bipod 3 inches left, lowered her shoulder, and realigned her scope. One shot, one crack. The metallic ring followed, another bullseye. The silence broke, not with laughter this time, but with applause. For the first time that day, applause. Stepped forward, jaw tight, forcing himself steady. His shot kissed the outer ring, good enough to stay in the fight, but not good enough to erase what she had just done. He felt the shift in the crowd. Their respect was moving away from him, toward her. Later, at the water station, Major Brooks approached Rachel. His face was calm, professional, but his words carried something beneath the surface. "Impressive work," he said, handing her a bottle. "Not bad for your first run here." Rachel accepted it with a nod, but her eyes stayed fixed on him, measuring. Brooks leaned in, voice low. "You're holding steady, Commander." Rachel's eyes narrowed, only slightly. Brooks corrected himself instantly. "I mean, Lieutenant, keep it tight. Orders from General, procedure stays intact." He gave her a faint smile and walked away. But wasn't far. He froze halfway through cleaning his rifle. He had heard it, Commander, General, his chest tightened. She wasn't who she claimed to be. The competition moved on. 4,900 meters. The storm pressed harder now. Clouds massed overhead, lightning flickering in the distance. The desert was no longer calm. It was alive, volatile. The rules were simple. This round would decide the finalists. Rachel dropped prone once more. The pendant slipped free from her collar, a flash of red swinging with the wind. She touched it, steadying herself, then pressed her cheek back against the stock. The rifle roared. The spotter's voice broke through the storm. "Center mass." The range froze. A woman with a crimson rifle had just conquered 4,900 meters. Walked to the line with lead in his legs. He inhaled, exhaled, forced calm. His shot struck the outer ring. Respectable, even extraordinary, but not unforgettable. When the scores posted, 3 names remained. Rachel, Garrison. Sergeant, a weathered Marine with 30 years behind a scope. 3 finalists. The storm gathered strength. The mood turned electric. Rachel's movement stayed calm, detached, efficient, as though this was never about competition. And suspicion hardened into certainty. She wasn't here for trophies. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here for something else entirely. The final shot loomed, 5,900 meters, nearly 4 miles, unbroken ground. Sergeant went first, a veteran, steady hands, steady breathing. His round streaked through the storm. The steel stayed silent. Exhaled heavily, rolling to his side, shoulders slumped. Settled next. Lightning lit the horizon, wind howled across the range. He fought against it, adjusted, squeezed. His shot hit the outer ring. Applause, respect, pride. He rose, smirking faintly, convinced Rachel couldn't top it. Rachel moved into place. The crimson rifle caught lightning, glowing in the storm. Her pendant clinked against the stock. The wind screamed across the field. Most shooters would have waited, but she didn't. Her notebook lay open beside her, pages filled with calculations inked by a steady hand. She whispered adjustments, her voice drowned by thunder. One deep inhale, half exhale, the trigger broke. The second stretched into eternity. Then metallic ping, dead center. The spotter's voice trembled. Hit, center mass, 5,900 meters. The range fell silent. No laughter, no applause, just silence. Rachel rose. Wind caught her jacket, pulling it aside. A tattoo showed on her forearm. Wings arched over a burning sun. Stomach turned to ice. He recognized it. The whispers from war zones. The mark of a project no one dared speak of. Project Helios. He whispered, impossible. But the storm swallowed his voice. Why didn't she celebrate? Why didn't she even smile? Every other shooter on that range would have thrown their hands up, basked in the applause, demanded respect. But Rachel only lowered the crimson rifle, calm as if the impossible was routine. Couldn't take it. He stepped forward, voice raised against the storm. I want her weapon inspected. Nobody makes that shot clean. The murmurs spread instantly. Accusation, suspicion, desperation. The crowd stirred, half agreeing, half uncertain. Rachel tilted her head slightly, unbothered, as if the demand were just weather passing by. From the command tent, a figure emerged. Silver hair slicked by rain, posture straight even without a uniform. General Cole, his presence cut through the noise like a blade. Proceed with the inspection, he ordered. Technicians moved in. They stripped the rifle piece by piece, checking every part with methodical precision. Barrel, bolt, optics, chamber. No electronics, no illegal modifications. Nothing but craftsmanship and wear. The crimson paint chipped in places, revealing steel seasoned by use, not vanity. Rachel spoke softly, almost lost to the thunder. My sister built it. She painted it red. Her words weren't for them. They were for herself. But even half swallowed by the storm, the meaning lingered. This wasn't decoration. It was memory. His gaze swept the soaked field. This championship is not yet finished, he declared. Verification protocol will commence. SOCOM round. 6,200 meters. Gasps rippled. The SOCOM test wasn't in the charts. It was whispered about in rumors, moving targets, strict time, no benches, no calm waits. A trial of speed, endurance, and precision beyond competition. His pride steadied him. He volunteered first. Rain hammered the range as he sprinted from post to post, rifle slamming against his shoulder. He dropped prone, fired, hit. Rose, ran, fired again. 5 targets down, chest heaving, lungs burning. At the final plate, 6,200 meters, his shot sailed wide, clanging off the frame. Still the bleachers roared. 5 out of 6 in a storm was no small feat. Straightened, water dripping from his cap, pride intact. Then Rachel stepped forward. Her movements were different, not frantic, not strained. She flowed from post to post like water finding stone. Rifle up, shot fired, target fell. Again. Again. Her breathing never faltered. Her pace never broke. At the final plate, 6,200 meters away, lightning cracked above. She touched the red pendant once, then exhaled, steady as stone. Her shot cut through the storm. Ping, center mass. All targets hit, the spotter's voice shook. The bleachers erupted in disbelief. Shouts, cheers, denial. Some clapped, others shook their heads, but no one could deny what they had seen. Stood frozen, pride collapsing into a hollow weight. Stepped forward, his voice carried through the storm. Assessment complete. Major, your status is confirmed. The word struck like a detonation. Major. Not lieutenant, not rookie. Major Rachel. She rose, posture shifting subtly, authority radiating now that her cover was no longer needed. Mouth went dry. It hadn't been a contest. It had been a test. Every stage, every doubt, every confrontation, all of it designed to evaluate her. And he, along with the others, had been part of a game they didn't even know existed. Her eyes met his briefly. No gloat, no triumph, only recognition, soldier to soldier. The storm raged harder, rain pelting the steel and sand. And then a runner burst from the command tent, soaked, breathless, voice breaking. Message from Ops. Guardian team stranded on Alaska Ridge. Immediate fire support required. The storm seemed to pause, listening. Casualties, 2 wounded, enemy forces converging. Rachel's composure cracked, if only for a moment. Her hand closed hard around the pendant at her neck. Who leads the team? She demanded. The messenger hesitated, his voice dropped. Lieutenant Daniel, Major, your brother. The words hit heavier than thunder. Rachel closed her eyes once, her breath trembling. Then she opened them again. The mask of command slid back into place, her voice steady. We move now. The storm over Fort Liberty was left behind. Within an hour, Rachel and were airborne in an unmarked transport. Engines hummed, gear rattled, night pressing against the windows. Inside the dim cabin, silence settled between them. Stared across the compartment, struggling to reconcile the truth. She wasn't the rookie he mocked. She wasn't just another shooter. She was something else entirely. Rachel sat composed, crimson case at her side, pendant glinting faintly against her chest. Her silence carried more weight than any explanation. The aircraft dipped. Cold air bit their faces the moment they stepped onto the icy ground of Alaska's mountain range. A field base had been set up beneath a sky heavy with snow. Inside the command tent, maps and satellite images covered the tables, lit by dim red lamps. General stood at the center, his voice clipped, decisive. The Guardian team is pinned here. He tapped the jagged ridge marked with red. Extraction window 90 seconds or less. Rachel leaned over the map, eyes sharp. 6 at the cave entrance, 2 patrol leaders circling, distances 6450, 4900, 4300. Her voice carried no hesitation. Stomach twisted. These weren't competition shots. These were lives hanging on distances most shooters called impossible. His eyes fixed on Rachel. You'll take the cave. Sergeant Garrison covers the patrol leaders. No one argued. Rachel turned too. You've been steady under pressure. I trust you for this. The words landed like iron. Technicians handed them portable weather kits. Snow rattled against the canvas walls. Winds climbing. UAVs jammed. You'll rely on your own readings, an officer warned. They moved out before dawn. A snowcat hauled them partway up the ridge. Then boots and sleds carried them higher, each step crunching into ice, each breath steaming in the bitter air. By the time they reached their perch, the storm had grown vicious. Visibility dropped, flakes swirling like shrapnel. Rachel dropped prone, cloak blending her into the rock. Lay beside her, wrestling with his borrowed rifle, heart pounding. Through the scope, the enemy came into view, faint outlines in the snow, circling, smoking, unaware of the hunters above them. Rachel's notebook fluttered in the wind. She anchored it with one gloved hand, pencil flying across the page. Called out weather data. Wind 10 to 15 knots, northeast, pressure falling, humidity high. Rachel's fingers adjusted her scope with surgical precision. Her breathing slowed into that strange rhythm again. The Helios rhythm still didn't understand. The radio crackled. Overwatch standby 10 seconds. Rachel touched the pendant at her neck. For a moment, Sophie's face returned to her mind, her twin sister, rifle slung casually, grin sharp in memory. Don't miss, not once. Rachel's eyes opened again, calm as stone. 3, 2, 1, execute. Fired, 2 cracks tore through the snowstorm. 2 patrol leaders dropped before they could even turn. Rachel's rifle sang 6 times in rapid rhythm. Each shift of the crimson barrel precise, recoil absorbed, corrections instant. One by one, the 6 guards at the cave collapsed. None reached cover. The storm howled, but silence fell across the ridge. What sound follows silence? After bullets have sung and enemies have fallen, what remains? For Rachel, it was the faint crackle of the radio. Targets neutralized, Overwatch area clear for extraction. Her voice was steady, flat, professional, as though she hadn't just performed the impossible. Lay beside her, chest heaving, unable to process what he'd seen. These weren't steel plates. These weren't competitions. These were men, armed and breathing only seconds ago. 6 collapsed before they could reach cover, each shot like punctuation, sharp and final. He wiped frost from his scope, hands shaking. He had been good today, better than most. But next to her, his effort felt small, almost amateur. Below, the Guardian team surged from the cave's shadows, pulling wounded comrades toward the landing zone. Boots kicked snow, shoulders strained under weight, but they moved fast, desperate, alive. Rotors thundered in the distance. The extraction bird broke through the storm, cutting through the swirling snow like an angel wrapped in steel. It dropped toward the ridge, skids biting into the frozen ground. Rachel kept her scope steady, scanning, always scanning. A sniper's job wasn't the trigger pull. It was the silence after, when the lives they protected were still in danger. Through her glass, she saw the last man stagger from cover, tall, broad shoulders, blood smeared along his sleeve. Even across 6 kilometers, she knew him. Lieutenant Daniel. Her brother. Her breath caught, but her hand stayed steady. She couldn't move, couldn't call out. She just watched as he paused at the helicopter's ramp, chest heaving, eyes lifting. Even at that impossible distance, Rachel felt his gaze. He raised a hand, salute, simple, unmistakable. Then he disappeared inside the helicopter. Her lips trembled for the first time that day. Quietly, so quietly almost didn't hear, she whispered, "Sophie, we did it." Her gloved hand clenched the red pendant until her knuckles whitened. The bird lifted, carrying the Guardian team away. The storm swallowed the sound of its rotors, leaving only wind and the hiss of snow. Rachel lowered the rifle, closed the notebook, packed her case with slow, deliberate care. Each click of metal, each snap of a latch, was louder than the storm in his ears. He followed her back down the ridge in silence. At the field base, General waited, his posture unbent despite the storm battering the canvas around them. His voice cut through the cold. "Major, flawless execution." Rachel nodded once. No smile, no relief, just acknowledgement. Turn 2, Sergeant Garrison, commendable performance. Straightened, unsure how to respond. Commendable. That word tasted foreign now, small compared to what he just witnessed. Studied him for a long moment, as though measuring something deeper than skill. Project Helios could use men like you. Consider this your invitation. Felt words catch in his throat. Hours ago, he had mocked her, called her rifle a car showpiece, doubted her every move. And now, here was a general offering him entry into a world he barely understood. Rachel said nothing. She only secured the crimson rifle case with the same quiet reverence she had shown since the first moment she opened it. Her hand ran across the scarlet surface, not boastful, not proud, protective. For others, the color might seem like vanity. Here it was blood and memory, a vow carved into steel. As the storm raged outside, finally asked the question that had burned since the first shot. What does the red really mean? His voice was softer now, no trace of mockery left. Rachel met his eyes, calm, unflinching. It means we don't forget, not the promise, not the cost. Her words hung heavier than the storm. The next day, the transport carried them back over the ridge. The mountains disappeared beneath a white curtain, but for the distances would never vanish. He knew nothing in his life would ever feel ordinary again. Rachel sat across from him, silent, pendant pressed against her chest. The crimson case rested beside her boots. She looked out the window as if searching for something far beyond the snow. Studied her face, not the cold mask she wore at the range, not the calm commander's poise from the ridge, but something else, a weight that never left her eyes. He wanted to ask more about Helios, about Sophie, about the promise she carried like a scar, but he didn't. Some truths, he realized, weren't meant to be dragged into daylight. Instead, he leaned back, closing his eyes. The image of the red rifle, glowing against the storm, stayed fixed in his mind. For Rachel, silence wasn't emptiness, it was memory. And sometimes, memory was the loudest sound of all. Why did her silence feel heavier than any gunfire? Back at the airfield, the storm of Alaska was left behind, but Rachel carried a different kind of storm inside her. She walked across the tarmac with the same measured pace she had carried on the range, crimson rifle case in hand, pendant against her chest. Calm, composed, unreadable. But saw something flicker in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. A shadow, a memory. The debriefing was short, didn't waste words. The Guardian team was safe. Extraction confirmed. Mission successful, casualties minimal, on paper flawless. But paper never told the full story. Inside the command trailer, heaters hummed against the cold. Maps still lined the walls, red markers still pressed into ridges and valleys now cleared of threat. Soldiers moved with subdued voices, packing up equipment, preparing to move on. Dismissed them all with a single nod. Only Rachel and remained. You both did well, the general said. Better than most could. But understand this, what you saw out there is the edge of what's possible. Past that edge, men break, or they disappear. His gaze shifted to, you asked for respect, Sergeant. You thought you'd earn it through bravado, through certainty. But now you've seen what respect really demands. Project Helios isn't about medals. It's about silence, endurance, a willingness to carry weight no one else can carry. Swallowed hard, throat dry. And if I say yes? His eyes narrowed slightly. Then you begin a life where nothing belongs to you anymore. Not your name, not your record, only the mission, only the promise. Nodded, but the words hit like stone. Did he want that? Could he even survive it? Dismissed him, leaving Rachel alone with her general. The room fell silent. Rachel placed the crimson case on the table, her gloved hand resting lightly on it. She didn't look at him. Studied her for a long time. His voice softened, though his posture never did. You've carried it well, but how much longer? Rachel's fingers curled against the case. She didn't answer. He sighed, rare weariness breaking through. Sophie was the best of us, but you, his words stopped unfinished. Perhaps because he knew she didn't want comfort. Perhaps because he knew comfort had no place here. Rachel finally spoke, her voice low, steady, but edged with something raw. She painted it red so we'd never forget. I don't intend to. Gave a faint nod. Then don't forget this either. There's always another mission. He turned, leaving her in the quiet hum of the heater. Rachel sat, opened the case, stared at the rifle inside, gleaming like embers even under the dim light. Her hand brushed the pendant, the chip of glass Sophie had worn once. The memory came unbidden. 17 again. The desert training ground, sun beating down. Sophie lying beside her on the wooden bench, hair sticking to her forehead, rifle balanced against her shoulder. "Don't miss, Ra," Sophie grinned, reckless, confident. "Not once, not ever." They had laughed then. Laughed because the target seemed easy, because youth convinced them nothing could touch them. But time had proved otherwise. The memory dissolved, leaving only the hum of the heater and the storm still raging inside her. Found her later, outside the trailer, standing alone in the cold. Snowflakes clung to her jacket, melting slowly against the heat of her skin. She looked out over the mountains as though searching for something buried in the distance. "You don't talk much," he said carefully. Rachel didn't look at him. Words don't steady a trigger. He shifted uneasily. "What said about Helios, about disappearing? Why'd you say yes?" She let the silence stretch before answering. "Because Sophie would. Because promises don't vanish when the person who made them does." Nodded slowly, though he didn't fully understand. He wasn't sure he ever would. But he felt something shift inside him. Respect, yes, but also fear, not of her skill but of the weight she carried with such quiet resolve. That night the transport lifted them from the frozen ridge, carrying them back into the dark sky. Inside the cabin, Rachel sat with her eyes closed, her hand still resting against the pendant, watched her from across the aisle. He wondered how long she could keep carrying silence like that before it broke her. Days later, Fort Liberty buzzed with life again. Competitors had dispersed, the championship officially concluded, but whispers lingered, about the woman with the red rifle, about the impossible shot, about the storm. Some said she had cheated, others claimed the rifle was cursed. Most stayed silent, unsettled by what they had seen. Walked the range, remembering the laughter, the doubt, the arrogance, remembering how quickly silence had replaced it all. He found himself at the same line where Rachel had first dropped prone, cheek against crimson steel, ignored and underestimated. He lay down, rifle pressed to his shoulder, and tried to mimic the breathing he had seen. 5 shallow inhales, 1 deep, half exhale. But it didn't feel right. His chest burned, his focus blurred. Whatever she had done, whatever she had learned, it wasn't just technique. It was something carved deeper, something earned through pain he hadn't lived. He lowered the rifle, staring out across the endless stretch of sand and steel. For the first time, he realized that respect wasn't about being louder. It was about being steady when everyone else faltered. Rachel appeared behind him, boots crunching lightly against gravel. "You'll only choke yourself like that," she said. He glanced back sheepish, "Thought I'd give it a try." She tilted her head, studying him. "Helios isn't breathing, it's remembering." "Remembering what?" Rachel's eyes darkened. "What you can't afford to lose." She walked past him, crimson case in hand, leaving him alone with a truth he couldn't yet understand. Watched her go, and for the first time he didn't want to challenge her, he wanted to follow. "What do you remember when silence won't leave you alone?" For Rachel, memories didn't arrive gently. They came like flashes, sudden, uninvited, sharp. In the weeks after Alaska, she trained in solitude. Days spent at ranges no one else used, nights in barracks that felt more like shadows than rooms. She spoke little, ate little, slept even less. And when her eyes closed, Sophie returned. The twin she could never escape. She saw her in the old desert range, laughing, rifle balanced carelessly as though it weighed nothing. Sophie's grin was always a little brighter, her stance a little looser. She had been reckless where Rachel was careful, loud where Rachel was quiet. But when the trigger broke, Sophie's bullets landed true, always true. "Don't miss, Ra, not once, not ever." Rachel would wake with those words ringing, chest tight, pendant clenched in her fist. The world outside didn't see that. To them, she was the major now, the red rifle an emblem, her silence a mask. Soldiers whispered her name in passing, some with awe, others with suspicion. Garrison heard both kinds. He had returned to Fort Liberty too, no longer the self-assured veteran he once projected, but a man unsettled by truths he couldn't quite touch, had offered him a place in Project Helios, an invitation into a shadow he hadn't asked for, and though part of him wanted to decline, to walk away, another part burned with something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity. So he stayed. He found himself watching Rachel more than speaking to her, watching how she trained, how she moved, how she carried the rifle like it wasn't a tool but an inheritance. One evening he caught her at the far end of the range, prone in the dust as twilight painted the sky in bruised colors. He didn't announce himself, just stood and listened. Her breathing, not the shallow rhythm she showed in competition, not the familiar cadence he knew from combat, something else, slower, deeper, like she was aligning her body with the earth itself. Then the rifle cracked. Steel rang impossibly distant. She whispered something after the shot, so faint he almost missed it. Sophie stepped closer. She didn't flinch, didn't look at him, only chambered another round. You always say her name, he said quietly. Rachel's eyes stayed locked through the scope, because I promised her. Lowered himself beside her, dust coating his uniform. Your sister. Rachel's jaw tightened. She didn't confirm, didn't deny. Waited, unsure if she'd speak again. But when she finally did, her voice carried the weight of something long buried. She was faster than me, better. She painted the rifle red because she thought war shouldn't erase us, said if the steel glowed they'd remember we were there, that we mattered. She paused, breath catching. I told her it was stupid. I told her it would get us seen, but she laughed, said hiding wasn't the point. Stayed quiet, letting her words unravel in their own time. When she didn't come back, I couldn't let the color fade, not her work, not her promise. Rachel's voice softened, almost breaking. So I carry it. Every time I breathe, every time I fire, I carry it for her. The silence afterward was sharp, heavy, unbroken. Stared at her, understanding for the first time that the red wasn't defiance. It was grief. He swallowed hard, the arrogance that once defined him gone entirely now. Then Helios. It wasn't just training, was it? Rachel finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired, unblinking. Helios wasn't a program, it was a crucible. They strip you down until nothing remains but silence. And in that silence, you decide whether you keep breathing or not. Sophie survived it better than anyone. I only followed. Let her words sink in. He realized then why he could never mimic her breathing, why he could never find her calm. It wasn't about lungs or technique. It was about loss. He had scars, yes. Combat tour, firefights, the kind of wounds you told stories about at bars. But nothing in his life had carved silence into him like that. Nothing had forced him to live every shot as a vow to someone who no longer stood beside him. Rachel reloaded, fired again. Another distant ring of steel. She didn't smile, she didn't even blink. She simply closed the notebook and stood, brushing dust from her uniform. Helios will eat you alive if you chase it for pride, she said quietly. If you say yes to, you better know what you're willing to lose. Then she walked past him, crimson case in hand, leaving with the sound of the steel still echoing in his ears. That night couldn't sleep. He sat in his quarters, rifle across his knees, staring at the ceiling. The offer from burned like fire in his chest. A chance to step into the shadows where legends lived. But Rachel's words lingered too. What was he willing to lose? He thought of his tour, the firefights, the friends who never came back. He thought of the medals folded neatly in boxes he hadn't opened in years. He thought of his pride, how it used to feel like armor and now felt like rust. And then he thought of her. Rachel, the silence she carried, the red rifle she treated like a vow, the way her brother's salute across 6 kilometers had shaken even her iron composure. He wondered if he could ever carry weight like that. He wasn't sure. But for the first time in years, doubt didn't feel like weakness. It felt like truth. Weeks passed. Missions whispered at the edges of Fort Liberty. Names disappeared from rosters without explanation. Helicopters lifted at night, returning light or not at all. Rachel moved among it all like a shadow herself, called when needed, silent when not. Her eyes gave nothing away but knew the storm never left her. One morning, as the sun bled pale light across the horizon, she found him at the range. "You decided?" she asked simply. Exhaled, breath visible in the chill air. "Not yet." Rachel nodded once, then train decide after. She dropped her crimson case, knelt, and opened it. The rifle gleamed as always, impossibly bright against the dust. Lay down beside her. And for the first time, she didn't push him away. What does it take to trust someone with your silence? When the mission came, it didn't arrive with alarms or briefings. It came as a single envelope. No seal, no name, just a time, a place, and one phrase: Red Hawk Protocol Live Scenario, Cold Trail. Rachel didn't blink when she read it. Hesitated. He stood in front of the mirror, the envelope heavy in his hand. He wasn't ready, but maybe that was the point. Maybe Helios didn't ask if you were ready. Maybe it just waited to see if you'd show up anyway. He did. When entered the staging hangar, Rachel was already there, packing the concrete floor in silence, her rifle case beside her, strapped tight. A technician fitted her with an encrypted radio, another checked her environmental kit. No small talk, no nerves. Stepped into the circle, handed over his ID, and received the same gear. This time Rachel looked at him, not through him, not past him, at him. He gave a short nod. "I'm in." Her eyes searched his face. "It's not about passing, it's about surviving, don't forget that." Before he could answer, the transport plane roared to life. Inside, the briefing was handwritten on one laminated sheet. A remote high-altitude site, no drone support, no air recon, a target embedded in a ridge system too narrow for ground units, local assets compromised, 2 snipers, window 14 minutes, wind speeds rising. Scanned the data and frowned. No tech backup. Rachel shook her head. This isn't backup, this is exposure. They were being tested again, but this time not for accuracy, for resolve. The plane banked hard. Rachel didn't flinch. She checked her rifle, clicked the bolt twice, gloved hands steady. Every movement told a story hadn't read yet. The jump came sudden. No countdown, no red light, just a green flash and a barked order: drop. Rachel moved like instinct, followed. The air hit them like ice. They fell into silence. The wind screamed across the spine of the cold trail ridge. Their boots punched into powdery snow, ice crunching beneath each step. The cold wasn't just temperature, it was hostility. Every breath felt like punishment. Their position was 4 clicks west of the ridge's teeth, a cragged line of stone that protected the bunker housing their target. As they climbed, Rachel moved first, always first. Her rhythm was unbreakable: step, slide, crouch, check wind, check range. Every 30 meters she recalibrated, watched, absorbing. He'd been good before. Now he was learning what excellent required. They reached their perch with 5 minutes to spare. Rachel unfolded the bipod, laid prone against the snow, and extended a telescopic pole with a fluttering red tag. "Wind marker," she murmured. Mirrored her position, side by side, 2 shapes against the cold. 3 patrols, she said. Roving east to west, 1 every 3 minutes. Primary target remains inside, no visual yet. You take high ground suppressors, I'll take direct glass. Adjusted his scope. The wind buffeted hard now. Wind gusting 12, shifting southeast. "Switch to thermal overlay," Rachel whispered. "Check roof vents." Did heat signatures flickered faintly, too faint for a body. He scanned left. 2 figures on the overlook leaning against crates, laughing, weapons loose. Rachel's voice was steel now. "Target 2, Commander, see the patch." Adjusted, saw it. The insignia was unmistakable. He felt his finger instinctively move closer to the trigger. "Not yet," Rachel whispered. And then finally the bunker door opened. A figure emerged, shorter, slower, bodyguard in tow, no helmet, bald head reflecting moonlight. Rachel's breath caught. "That's him." Turned his eye, confirmed. Rachel didn't speak. She adjusted windage, lifted the bolt, chambered a round. Distance, 6,120. Nodded, "Call it." 3, 2, 1. The shots broke as one. Two cracks, two pings. Rachel's round shattered the commander's skull before he took his third step. His bullet dropped the spotter on the overlook, mid-turn. Then chaos. Shouts, lights, alarms. Enemies scrambled, unsure where the shots came from. But Rachel was already moving. She packed her rifle in 7 seconds. No wasted motion. She tapped the shoulder. "Shift now." They moved laterally across the ridge, vanishing before counterfire could locate them. Bullets tore through where they had lain seconds ago. A patrol swept up the west incline, but Rachel ducked into a crevice, hands signaling down with her. They didn't speak. They barely breathed. Snow fell around them like ash. Above, flashlights swung. Voices shouted in a language neither of them needed to understand. Then silence. They waited still, invisible. 20 minutes later, they exfiltrated across a glacier, the wind so loud they couldn't even hear their own footfalls. When the chopper appeared, ghost-like in the blizzard, finally exhaled. Inside the transport, soaked in sweat and cold, leaned against the wall. He was shaking, though he didn't know if it was the adrenaline or something deeper. Rachel sat across from him, silent again, crimson case between her knees. Looked at her, really looked. "You didn't miss." She turned her eyes to him. "I promised I wouldn't." Back at Fort Liberty, the wind was different, warmer, but Rachel's silence hadn't thawed. Expected congratulations, debriefs, applause, there was none. Only a folder slid across a table. Inside, a commendation and a question. Operational transfer approval, Project Helios Field Division. Stared at it. "You're in," said a voice. "Quiet final if you sign." Hesitated. "I didn't understand before," he said. "About the promise, about the red, I do now." His expression didn't shift. Understanding is step 1. Living with it is step 2. Most people never reach 3. Looked at Rachel. She gave no encouragement, no warning. Just her silence. That was enough. He signed. What happens when the storm finally ends? For Rachel, storms never ended. They only moved, shifted, returned in different skis. The mission at Cold Trail was over. The files were stamped. The targets erased. Had signed his name into Helios, stepping into a world that swallowed identities whole. And yet, silence lingered. Rachel walked alone that night. The base was quiet, moonlight slanting across rows of hangars and empty training fields. Her boots crunched gravel, but her thoughts were louder than her steps. She carried the crimson rifle case at her side, but it wasn't weight she felt. It was Sophie, always Sophie. She stopped at the far end of the field, the same kind of field where they had once trained as girls. She knelt, opened the case, and laid the rifle across her knees. Her hand closed around the pendant. For a long moment she just breathed. In, out, slow, steady, not the Helios rhythm, not the forced cadence of missions, just her breath, human, fragile, real. Her whisper broke the night. "You'd laugh at me now, Soph. You'd call me too serious. You tell me to loosen up, to paint the whole damn rifle red, not just the stock." Her eyes closed, tears threatening but never falling. "I didn't forget, I never will, but I need you to know every shot I take, it isn't mine, it's ours." The words drifted into the silence, swallowed by the night. She lowered her head, pressing the pendant against her lips, and for the first time since the storm in Nevada, she allowed herself to break just a crack. Her shoulders shook once, twice, then stilled. When she rose, the mask of the Major was back in place, but something had shifted. The silence she carried no longer felt like punishment. It felt like memory honored. Found her the next morning. He didn't ask what she had done, what she had said. He just saw her eyes, sharper now, and understood something had settled. They walked side by side to the range. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Lay prone first, sighting a target nearly 2,000 meters out. His breathing was steadier now, shaped by what he had witnessed, softened by what he had learned. He fired. Steel rang. Rachel said nothing, but her eyes flicked once toward him. Approval, maybe, or at least acknowledgement. Then she dropped prone herself. The crimson rifle stretched against the earth. The sun rose higher, lighting the scarlet steel until it glowed like fire. She breathed 5 shallow, 1 deep, half exhale. The shot cracked. Steel sang. For a moment, the sound hung in the desert air, clear and clean, louder than all the doubts that had once filled this place. Weeks later, another envelope arrived. Another mission, another storm. They didn't flinch this time. Rachel led, followed. And for the first time in his life, understood what it meant to walk into silence willingly. The world would never know her name, not the real story, not the promise. To the few who had seen, she was simply the woman with the red rifle, the one who never missed, the one who carried something unspoken inside her eyes. But for Rachel, that was enough. She didn't need medals, she didn't need applause. Her vow was not to the world. It was to one face, one voice, one memory that painted steel red so the promise would never fade. And so she carried it, through ranges and storms, through missions and silence. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes, the loudest vow is made without words at all.